Hello, this is Russell Davis with The Art of Artists, and your mental picture of my guest this time will vary according to how much you know of the 60s. And I mean know at first hand. It's not what you think. I'm not going to say that if you weren't there in the 60s, you're underinformed about Sandie Shaw, the barefoot contessa of British song. It's rather the opposite, that those of us who were there got stuck too easily in the image-making of that time and assumed that Sandie would get stuck too. But having freshened up my ideas about her in advance of meeting her, I can see already that though there were sticky moments, she's kept moving more than most of us. It's hard to believe that her career goes back more than 50 years, but to confirm it, here's a number one hit of 1964 that allows us to ponder that a little. In fact, it's a song that defines itself because it's always something there to remind me.
I walk along the city streets you used to walk along with me, and every step I take recalls how much in love we used to be. Oh, how can I forget you when there is always something there to remind me, always something there to remind me. And I will never be free. You'll always be a part of me. Oh, 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 oh. When shadows fall, I pass a small cafe where we would dance at night, and I can't help recalling how it felt to kiss and hold you tight. Oh, how can I forget you when there is always something there to remind me, always something there to remind me. I was born to love you, and I will never be free. You'll always be a part of me. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Should find you miss the sweet and tender love we used to share, just come back to the places where we used to go, and I'll be there. Oh, how can I forget you when there is always something there to remind me, always something there to remind me. I was born to love you, and I will never be free when there is always something there to remind me, always something there to remind me.
Always something there to remind me. A Burt Bacharach and Hal David song, and a number one hit for my guest, Sandie Shaw. Sandie, welcome.
Thank you.
We don't have to believe it if we don't want to, but that was 1964, 50 years ago. To me, a lot of songs of that era seem like they belong to the mists of time, but not that one, actually.
You're being flattering.
No, I don't. I don't.
It's a really good song.
It doesn't feel dated, does it?
No, it doesn't at all. We were talking about lyricists, and I was saying that Hal David, the guy that wrote the lyric, is just so underrated. They always talk about Burt Bacharach, but for me, it's the earlier work that he did that was so good when he wrote with Hal David.
Was it Eve Taylor who first found that song, who picked it up in America and brought it back?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing they did in those days.
And it was Adam Faith who alerted her to you.
They were co-managing me.
And where did he see you then? What kind of gigs were you doing? Because you were very, very young.
I started singing when I was about 15, and I used to sing in dance halls and like local social clubs at home, around Dagenham and Ilford, Romford, that kind of way. And through doing one of those, I was asked to appear on one of his shows that he was doing in London, a charity show. And he was on, and the Hollies were on, and they all went crazy when I started singing, because there were lots of boys groups and boys doing things that were of the moment, but there weren't any girls doing their thing. So Adam Faith's always been a bit entrepreneurial, and so he started me off and started putting me in the recording studio, and I started producing my own stuff from that age, from 16, when I started, yeah.
Yeah. Is there a Dagenham Hall of Fame? Because there should be.
There should be. There's much more of us now. It seems to be growing, doesn't it?
Well, it was pretty good once upon a time. It was Dudley Moore came from there. Yeah. George Carey, the Archbishop of Canterbury, as was. He was brought up in Dagenham. Alf Ramsey, who was nearly as famous as you in 1966.
We've got Sue Lawley.
Oh, really?
We have Sue Lawley, and we have Ollie Mers.
Oh, gosh.
And Jamie the cook.
It's growing all the time.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Well, there should be one. But Dagenham in those days meant two things to me. It was the girl pipers, the Dagenham girl pipers, and the Ford factory. And you did work there must have been very briefly because you were so young. Is that right? You did work for them?
I never worked in the factory. Everybody thinks I worked in a factory. It's part of the mythology. No, I worked for their offices. I worked in the computer department. And so I had nothing to do with the factory floor. My mother wouldn't have let me do that.
No.
And, yeah.
Yes.
Only for 6 weeks.
Oh, well, that's 6 weeks. It's putting in your time in Dagenham, I suppose.
Yeah.
But being a solo singer, starting out as one, as you say, wasn't the easiest way to go in those days because the groups were the thing. And even the prominent solo singers, a lot of them came out of groups, like Dusty Springfield came out of the Springfields and so on.
Yeah, she did.
How did you know you were going to be able to gain control of so much of what you did even then, because nobody else was doing it?
I wasn't doing it for those reasons, for gaining control. I was just doing it because I loved doing it and I knew what I wanted to do. So people, well, they had to listen to me. I suppose. But I used to work with a guy called Chris Andrews.
Yes.
Who was a songwriter and also came from Dagenham.
Yeah. I thought he was from Romford. But
it's round the corner.
Yeah. And he's still around, isn't he? Abroad, though.
Yeah, he lives in Germany. He has a German wife. And I see him from time to time. And I always come up from him behind and squeeze his bum and say, "Guess who this is?" He says, "You're the only person that touches my bum."
And when it wasn't Bacharach and David, it was usually him. I mean, he wrote a string of hits. Yeah.
Most of the stuff. And it was really nice working with him because he would start off with something, then I would change it, and he wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
And I'd tell him to change the lyrics, and he wouldn't mind that. So he was good to work with. We kind of bounced off each other.
You made such a good job of that Bacharach and David song. It's a wonder to me that you didn't become the kind of official purveyor of their songs in this country in the way that Dionne Warwick did in the States.
No, it didn't work like that. She was their session singer, so she got first dibs on everything.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to be a covers person. I had the original stuff that was being written for me. So
yeah. And the look. How much of that was yours? I mean, you've always been interested in fashion and style. And
all young girls are, aren't they?
Yeah.
They know exactly what they want to look like. And I don't particularly like fashion as such. I just like the way things look and that they're part of what you're putting across, how you look. And there's kind of like some subliminal message that goes with it as well.
You did have easily the longest legs in pop, so that you're off to a good start with that.
Well, they haven't disappeared.
No, that's absolutely right. Let's get Eurovision out of the way, because I know having to take up some sort of attitude one way or the other, and it's changed a bit over the years, has been the bane of your life in a way. But it needs to be said for the benefit of those who weren't there at the time and weren't even thought of at the time, that you won that thing by virtually a record margin. It was a huge victory that you had.
Yeah, it was great, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to win.
Yes. And in those days it was thought to be really about songs, because there weren't that many countries involved in it, but all the ones that were had certain interest in songs. They had their own song festivals at home. Certainly the French, the Germans, the Italians did, and so on.
That's true, but I think the Beeb did a bit of a naughty thing by asking me to do it, because I was always already a huge star in all those countries. So
yes.
I had a ready-made audience. So I think I had a bit of an unfair advantage.
It wasn't the easiest song to do, was it? It was a bit of a beast for the novelty song that it was. was. Can't think of another song that starts with a great long note like that one and then goes into the bip, 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 which is like a sort of vocal exercise. It's quite tricky.
I've never heard anybody describe that in such musical terms before. I'm in awe.
No. Anyway, at the time, the idea of political voting hadn't come to pass, did it? They were actually charmed by the song, so fair enough. You weren't, though. I mean, no reason why you should be. In terms of...
It was a job.
Yes.
I hear Michael Caine's done lots of movies that he didn't want to do.
More than the ones he did. Yes, that's quite right. Let's hear it anyway, because we have to, and it's...
Here comes the umpire.
Why not? And, of course, we'll talk later about what you did with it later, because you did come back to it when you felt like it, but much later. Here it is, Puppet on a String.
I wonder if one day that you say that you care. If you say you love me madly, I gladly be there like a puppet on a string. Love is just like a merry-go-round with all the fun of the fair. One day I'm feeling down on the ground, then I'm up in the air. Are you leading me on? Tomorrow will you be gone? I wonder if one day that you say that you care. If you say you love me madly, I gladly be there like a puppet on a string. I may win on the roundabout, then I'll lose on the swings. In or out, there is never a doubt just who's pulling the strings. I'm all tied up in you, but where's it leading me to? I wonder if one day that you say that you care. If you say you love me madly, I gladly be there like a puppet on a string. I wonder if one day that you say that you care. If you say you love me madly, I gladly be there like a puppet on a string. Like a puppet on a string.
Puppet on a String, runaway winner of the Eurovision Song Contest 1967, sung by Sandie Shaw. And of course that was a song you automatically had to record in German, Italian, Spanish and French and all those languages that you did too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love singing in different languages. It's wonderful.
So it wasn't just a chore to go
No.
through all those versions. You
No,
got a
I love
kick out of
doing it. Yeah, I've always loved singing in different languages. I started when I was really young. When I was about 17, I started with French, and it opened up a whole different audience for me.
Did you stick to the European ones, or did you sometimes go further afield linguistically?
No, I didn't. I stuck with that. But with Spanish, it also went around South America.
Of course.
Yeah. And a bit of America.
Yeah. And 7 years ago, was it, you revisited that song? Again, different tempo, different feel altogether. And a very subtle revenge on the thing, I suppose it might have been.
There you go again. That's great. I love it. A subtle revenge.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did another version, kind of like a wistful version,
Yes.
really.
Yes.
I'd love to do another version. I'd love to do a scream-out kind of dance, huge David Guetta kind of
Yes.
version, and like a huge dance video to go with it. I'd love to do that, really turn it on its head. But there you go. There's lots of things I love to do and I never get around to.
Oh, you should get around to that. I'd buy that. Is it true you turned down It's Not Unusual at some stage for some reason?
Yeah, I turned it down. It was sent to me as a demo. You know, olden days we used to have these little vinyl discs.
White
that were-
labels.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't even white labels. They were black. big thick things, acetates.
Oh, the acetate one.
The acetates.
Yes.
And yes, I've got an acetate of Tom Jones doing my demo for me. So I turned it down because I thought he sang it so well. I just said, no, he's got to record it. This is ridiculous.
Well, I don't think you missed much. 'Cause if you look at that lyric written out, it makes absolutely no sense at all. It's a completely nonsensical song.
It just makes sense, though, doesn't it? It's like when Tom Jones sings it. It just really,
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
it was the making of him. And he's sweet because he's always been grateful for that. I'll give him that.
The only other obligatory subject we've got to do is the barefoot thing. Did you just like singing with your shoes off?
And I do most things with my shoes off.
There you go. Although, when you started marketing a look in terms of clothes and so on, shoes was one of the first things you did, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had a shoe label. I've still got one pair of shoes in the Sandie box that I keep. Yeah.
Just pristine, unworn. And, yeah.
Well, no, they've been worn a bit. I know this, labelled what shows they were worn on.
But getting through all this, I mean, contracts, copyrights, licensing, all that, you were on top of at an early stage.
I was, but I didn't realise it. I had to do lots of legal stuff, and I'm jumping to the 80s now because
that's all right. Yeah.
It wasn't until the 80s when I worked with the Smiths
Yes.
that I had the wherewithal to challenge all the contracts that I'd had. And a lot of them, because I was underage when I signed them, they were out of time. You can only sue within a certain amount of time. So I lost all that. But I did reclaim everything during that time by proving that it actually had belonged to me all along, which is great now. It's just fantastic to know that I own my body of work because I can caretake it properly. I can make sure that it's looked after properly and not misused. You see so many people's work misused nowadays.
Your travels, because of all these international versions of songs, were not just geographical, they were political as well, weren't they? Because, I don't think we noticed this at the time in Britain, but you did a kind of world tour of despots and dictators.
No, I didn't do a world tour, but being able to access the audiences there, you had to appease whoever was leading the country in one way or another. You had to do that. So if I wanted to sing in Greece, I had to sing for the Greek militia. And if I wanted to sing in Persia or the Middle East, I had to sing for the Shah. And the same thing in if I wanted to sing in South Africa, I had to sing for all the government people there first before they would allow me to sing to the black audiences that I wanted to sing in the first place. It wasn't a global industry then.
No.
That it is now, that's been built now. And so those lines of communication through entertainment just weren't open. So the only ones that were actually open were cultural, political ones. And so those were the doors that I had to open. But the people in the satellite countries just loved listening, and they could get it. They could get it by satellite, all the stuff that was going on. So I had huge fan bases in places now that have these lovely new names, Herzegovias and places like that. And every now and again I'd go there. I'd go to Czechoslovakia or Bulgaria or all those countries. It's just so thirsty for a democratic way of living.
Yes.
And I was kind of like represented that to them.
In those days, when you arrived, say, in Persia or Chile, what sort of entourage would you have? Would it be like...
Oh, no, I didn't take anybody, really. I just took my secretary.
Yes.
Sometimes an MD. That's about it, really. I would pick up a band while I was there. But most of my time I tried to spend just with my girlie. She's called my secretary, actually. She was my girlfriend. Not girlfriend. She was my mate.
Right.
Just somebody female to talk to rather than smelly boys' socks everywhere.
Guilty, yes. But every so often, and it happened then, I suppose, after all these hits and all this travel, you've kind of stopped. You felt you've had enough for the time being. And sometimes it's felt quite final, but it turned out, thank goodness, not to be.
I wanted it to be final, though. I wanted it to be final. I remember as soon as I got pregnant, I thought, well, that's it, I can stop now.
Yeah.
I'm so old-fashioned, aren't I? It's what we used to do. It's like, oh, yes, I can put my dancing shoes up or my bare feet up and have a rest. And I so wanted to. But it turned out that I wasn't able to.
You went into acting for a bit.
I did some acting, which was great. I loved it.
Big roles you did too.
Yeah, I was. We used to live around the corner to Glenda Jackson and her husband, then husband Roy Hodges, and he came. I saw him out somewhere, and he said, "Oh, Glenda and I've been talking about you in bed." I thought, oh, sounds a bit unhealthy. So he said, yeah, we reckon that you should play Ophelia in this thing. So I started playing some Shakespeare, and then I liked that so much that he then cast me as Joan of Arc in St. Joan, the Bernard Shaw
Bernard
thing.
Shaw version, yes, right, yes.
And then because my husband was in trouble financially, I couldn't continue doing it, because you have to be able to afford to act nowadays.
Yes.
And I couldn't, because I had so many of his bills to pay. But there you go.
Did people did readily accept you as a stage?
Yeah, I mean,
actor,
Joan of Arc was made for me. I love her. I've done a pilgrimage to Rennes and everything.
Oh gosh. Because they seem to have a tolerance for comedians, especially, who go straight, as it were. But singers, I don't know. There aren't too many of them who've tried it. But,
Well, some of them, they do musicals. But I think I've always been considered as a bit left of field and not kind of like... I don't think I'm quite considered... Although they keep trying to push me into being a light entertainment, because that's about the extent of their imagination as far as women are concerned. I push that boundary that way. And I think because I'm quite known for doing things a bit off the wall, so that's why they accepted it, I suppose.
yes.
And all the other actors like me. And it's really great, because even nowadays I see them on the people that I acted with on telly or in a film or something, and I say, oh, that's so-and-so, he played my...
I think it was in one of these pauses, or it might have been, that you put out an interesting album called Reviewing the Situation, which at the time I took it that was what exactly you were doing. You were looking around, seeing who was writing what and picking favourites from them. Because there was Dylan, there was Donovan, Beatles, Stones, John Sebastian, Rufus Thomas from the R&B situation, different stuff, and that was an interesting departure.
Well, I think people by that time had got into concept albums, hadn't they? So, and I'd never really done albums before. I was a singles girl, so I'd put out maybe 4 or 5 singles a year. That's like 10 songs. That's like an album. So my albums really consist of things that I didn't consider proper for an A side. My B sides are my best work. And my B-sides, because they're the songs that I didn't think would cut it commercially, but the ones that I really enjoyed singing. So when I came to the end of the 60s, I think I was also at the end of a contract, so I could do what I wanted to do. And I decided just to review what had happened in the 60s, and like the things that had actually caught my eye or ear or whatever, all the way from Rufus Thomas all the way up to Led Zeppelin, which then was like the thing just coming through. And it was like my take on it, really, a musical take on things that had caught my ear. Even when I did things like Coconut Grove, that was to do with how America had kind of influenced what was going on towards the end of the 60s and how things suddenly changed.
Well, just because it's unusual to hear you doing a song from a musical, let's hear the title track, also the first track on the album, a song from Oliver. In fact, sung by Ron Moody as Fagin in Oliver, and it's called Reviewing the Situation.
Man's got a heart, hasn't he? Joking apart, hasn't he? And though I'd be the first one to say I wasn't the same, I'm finding it hard to be really as black as they paint. I'm reviewing the situation. Can a fella be a villain all his life? All the trials and tribulation. Better settle down and make myself a wife. As a wife, I cook and sew for him and come for him and go for him and go for him and I got him. Fingers I would wag at him, the money I would take from him, the misery I'd make for him. Pick up and take it on again. A wife he can keep anyway. I'd rather sleep anyway. Left without anyone in the world, and I'm starting from now. So how to impress, to influence people somehow. I'm reviewing the situation. I must quickly look up everyone I know. Time of people with a station who can help me make a
situation from Oliver, but also from the album of the same name by Sandie Shaw, who's with me today. You'd have made a very good Nancy. Did anybody ever ask you? Perhaps I should rephrase that, but... I will rephrase that.
Sorry,
But,
you're so full of the unexpected.
well, good. But you would.
I loved Lionel Bart. I thought he was brilliant. I just
Yeah.
loved everything that he did and everything about him. He was such an extraordinary, generous man in every single way, that I felt that he was a working class writer.
Yes.
That was the first time. He was like pre-Andrew Lloyd Webber. All the kind of musical stuff before that had been a bit...
Yeah.
So he was like the first. So I think that's why I chose him.
We now come to those hard times in the 70s, which you have talked about. And the melodramatic version of how it all was resolved was that Morrissey and the Gang, the Smiths and so on, sort of fished you out of retirement because they were fans, really. That's
Yeah.
as simple as that.
Yeah.
Is that really what
Yeah.
did happen? Yeah.
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 I don't know what I did to deserve that, in more ways than one.
Well, it's hard to imagine Morrissey doing something so voluntarily heroic.
Yes, he's not all bad.
But I read everywhere, and you've said it too, that he's very, very difficult to... But that Johnny Marr, who was his guitar sidekick, was much...
I think
more easy to
Morrissey
do.
works at being difficult.
Yes.
I don't think it comes as easily as he makes out.
Yeah.
There are some really... I've had talks with him at times, and he has some really soft spots. You have to really unpeel the onion to get to them, but, you know.
You did university tours and stuff and things like that. That was the way back into... Was it? To stage work?
I thought this is a chance to actually go back to basics. Because I'd been with the Smiths, I'd suddenly found this new young audience
Yeah.
that I hadn't had before. It was really good because, like, afterwards, the students would come back backstage and ask questions and tell me about their lives, and it was a really kind of good exchange. It was really kind of personal. I learned a lot from that and realised I really do love young people so much still. I love that hopefulness that they have.
You obviously needed much more time sort of to think about you, because it's about then that you got... Well, the focus of the story shifts from the outwardness of pop music to the inwardness of other things. Buddhism was one, psychotherapy was another. Did they arrive sort of together?
No, I started practicing Buddhism when I was 30.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was probably the turnaround time in my life where things started getting better and better and better. And I was kind of more in sync with myself and with people around me. And I went to university when I was just before I was 40, around 40-ish.
What difference does Buddhism make? What to you? Adopting that, embracing Buddhism in the way that you did. What difference would it make to your life in the business, for example? As an artist.
In many ways, it's made it more difficult because it's made me, it's to do with finding your integrity and always going back to that point all the time and trying to bring out the best in yourself all the time and the best in everybody else around you. The business is not really keyed up to that sort of thing. And I find it very hard sometimes sticking to my principles when everybody around me is unprincipled. I suppose everybody could say that whatever their circumstances, whatever their environment was, but I do find that the clash between people's desire for fame and commerce and making loads of money and just the sort of the antithesis of what the creative impulse is all about. One of the urges of being a Buddhist is to make proper contact with somebody else, make a real life-to-life contact.
Yes.
And it's also false, our industry. Even if you walk into a studio, you and I sitting here sort of like talking about subjects that are quite intimate for me, and probably you've spent a lot of time writing down all your questions. And we've never met each other before.
Yes.
We may not meet each other again, and it's kind of a false...
Yes.
It's a false premise.
Mm-hmm.
And journalists, when I speak to journalists, I find that really difficult because I just want to be myself but I daren't give them what they were, in case they misused it, because I don't know where they're coming from.
Yes.
So it's not like that all the time, but those are the difficulties or the questions that I'm always asking myself all the time. How am I learning to do it with you now?
Well,
I'm being honest with you and
Yes.
thinking, right, I'm throwing this in, and I know you're struggling, thinking, what kind of an interview is
No,
this?
I'm very grateful for it. No, it's exactly the point that I wanted to get at. But I wanted to know, for example, if what you've just been talking about clashes at all with the therapeutic impulse, because if you're pursuing your own fulfillment in the way that you've described, how do you? It obviously didn't for Jung, for example, because he pursued both. But
it's not like that at all, because you cannot achieve your own enlightenment without the enlightenment of everything around you. It has to be like that.
Right.
And enlightenment, it just means knowing that the truth of that moment. It's nothing fancy. It's just knowing the truth of that moment and living that moment 100%.
Right.
So I try to make every interaction that I make. I can't become enlightened on my own. I need my environment for me to work with all the time. So it's not a me thing. It's a me. It's you and me.
Right.
It's all about you and me. Probably I would be a solitary person if I didn't practice Buddhism. But because I practice Buddhism, I go out and try to connect with people.
Yes. Time for some more music while I digest all that. Something to commemorate the Morrissey and Johnny Marr connection from Nothing Less Than Brilliant, which is a great, confident title, I must say. This is a song called I Don't Owe You Anything. My guest, Sandie
Oh,
Shaw.
I like that song.
And a song by Morrissey and Johnny Marr. I don't owe you anything. I'm glad you like it. Good, good. Now let's talk about the present day and the things that are continuing. The Arts Clinic is still run. That's in the Harley Street.
Arts Clinic.
Yes.
Yeah, I still run that. I don't often do. In fact, I don't do any therapy myself anymore
Right.
because I can't be in the public eye and see somebody.
No.
Firstly, because I'm not constantly available, and secondly, because it mucks up their perception of me as a therapist. If they can see me on the telly and everything, it kind of
Yes.
it doesn't work.
Yes.
So, but we have great. It means that what the purpose of me doing it wasn't to start a practice of my own. I already had one. What it was to make sure that artists and creators and people in the creative industries had access to people that were pucker, that people that were properly qualified, people that, because we're suckers, and so many people, I see them spending fortunes on these quacks, and I was just wanted to make sure that they were able to get the best possible. So we've got all the best consultants there and all people that I would trust to send. My always thing is like, would you trust them with one of your children? Would you trust them with your spouse?
Yes.
So I always base my judgment of somebody's practice on that.
In a more immediately practical direction, there's the Featured Artists Coalition, which is a campaigning group designed to protect the rights of musicians out on the great digital ocean. I suppose that's the way to put it, isn't it?
That's another nice phrase you've got.
But I don't know how you'd go about that because it's so vast. The field is so vast and changeable. So much room for exploitation. And it's unregulated. So how do you do it? Yeah.
Well, for a start, you start an organisation for recording artists. There's never been one before. Never. And so what's been happening is that we've been represented by other bodies that purport to represent us, and they don't. So that's the start of it, and that is no mean task, because recording artists are, we are narcissistic and egotistic and in it for ourselves, and we're competitive, and so for us to join any kind of organisation is a huge step. But it's not me on my own. I mean, like the whole board is made up of artists, so we all take our turns in doing things. And, I work with Nick from Pink Floyd a lot, who's gorgeous. He's like a hamster. and Ed O'Brien from Radiohead, who is just adorable. And Billy Bragg was also really supportive as well, and great people to work with.
Talking of huge things to be overcome, as you were just now, on top of everything else, the varied businesses of life, you had a horrible car crash last year. Was it last year?
See my scar?
Yeah.
This is my scar. Look, it's not here. Can you see? It's covered up a lot down here and goes down to my eye here.
Well.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a nice moment, though. Goodness me.
Yeah, but it makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah.
It certainly makes you think. The car broke. We would have been okay. We were in a 4x4, but there was something wrong with it that cracked when we were going over, and then we kept going over because it cracked and broke. And so it got all pretty nasty.
Yeah. This was in France, so...
Yeah. Luckily it was in France because we were in the middle of the country and they're just so together. I knew the firemen because they come and knock at my door and introduce themselves, so you know who they are, and you see them down at the square, and also all the people from the ambulances. I knew them as well because I'd seen them down the market. So going in and out of consciousness and then seeing a friendly face that I knew was really cool. This is great. I think it's a rather nice scar, don't you think? I should have had some surgery,
on it.
Some proper cosmetic stuff, but I haven't got round to it.
Yes, maxillofacial surgeons. Yes. Terrible trade, but very, very essential. After that, there was understandably noises about you stopping altogether, and I think probably you did mean it this time, but it didn't work again, because as we speak, there's a new single out.
I did mean it. I so meant it. I'd done a year on tour with Jules Holland, and it was wonderful. I actually found out that I'm really good on stage. I found I had a great rapport with the audience. I found out that I no longer suffer from performance anxiety, which totally crippled me when I was younger. Gone completely. So
Isn't that great? Because it goes the other way with so many people. They get
healed
worse.
myself. So,
Yeah.
So, and
Wonderful.
Jules kept saying to me, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. And he said, you've got to do what makes you happy. You've got to do what makes you happy. And when I was having the car crash, I kept thinking, I'm not happy. I can't die yet because I'm not doing what makes me happy. I don't want to continue like this. And I was just about to sign a contract, decided not to sign it.
Mm.
So I didn't sign it, and I decided that what doesn't make me happy is I don't want to, I can do it, but I don't want to continue doing all this stuff that I've done before when I was younger. I mean, I'm a big girl now, for goodness sake. It's ridiculous. And whilst it's great to actually please an audience, I get nothing out of it. Mm. Except that I know that I've pleased them, and I think this is a bit of a one-way street. So that was why I decided to retire. And then, ta-da!
Yeah.
And then somebody said to me, what would make you want to sing? I said, well, working with people I really admire, people that I think would bring out something in me that I hadn't touched before. And they said, well, write a list of people. So I had 2 people on my list. And one of them was a guy called Neil Davidge, who'd done work on Massive Attack.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the country in Bristol, he was making his list of people he'd liked, voices he wanted to work with. And I was on that list. And so he rang me. And it was like, wow, this thing happening at the same time. So the song was difficult at first, but then as soon as it was great. It was almost like an acting song.
Yes.
And one that was really kind of profound, subject material I really found was mine, could claim it, and
long notes, big sound. It was quite different from
and really
a lot of
cinematic. That's what I love. I like songs with pictures, and just great working there and being in Bristol and just working with people. It was for the crack. It was for the crack. And to do that, when all my life I've been... The downside of owning and all your stuff and being caretaker is that there's lots of business and management and those kind of problems that you think about rather than just the work. Mm. So for once it was just the work, and I thought, oh, this is brilliant, I love this. So I said, yeah, put it out. That's what happened. Yeah. And I don't know what's going to happen next. Mm. I'm freewheeling.
But the voice is
free basing.
The voice is so broad on it. It's
my proper voice. It's my proper voice. I think what you start with is your baby voice, and then you get your middle period voice, which I suppose is probably the stuff around the Smiths and the Hello Angel album. Yeah. And this is my voice for now. Mm. At least I have one.
Certainly. I was thinking this morning, the 60s was the voice of a flower, and now it's the voice of a tree. This is
wow.
Don't you think?
Oh, I love you. Yeah. I hope so. With deep roots. Mm. Mm. I hope so, because I was thinking, I don't have the advantages that I had when I was young. I'm not beautiful. Well, I'm attractive. I know I'm attractive. You don't have to flatter me again. But I'm not beautiful like you are when you're young. I'm not. I can't run up and down the street like a mad person anymore. Mm. But what I do have is that I've got a less is more kind of thing. I've got minimum effort, maximum result because of my experience and depth that I would like to impart to other people, and an openness, I think, to get something back all the time. It's like a two-way street. Mm. So I presume that's why I still like working with creative people and young people, although older people are okay too.
Let's hear what we've been talking about. Ideally, we should see the video too, but we can't do that. But it's called...
Imagine it.
It's called Riot Pictures. Riot Pictures featuring Sandie Shaw, which I thought was... you were going to be off to the side a bit, but if it's full on you, isn't it? I mean, you are the front person of this video.
Oh, well, you've got to meet Neil. He hides under the table all the time. I have to talk for him. It's
Right.
wonderful.
Yeah.
He's great. He just wanted me to lead it, and I was happy to do that.
Let me ask you, because we're near the end of our time, let me ask you about songs, because you have such a huge experience of singing them, but also a psychological insight into their place in the conscious and unconscious worlds, I suppose. Why do we like them so much? Why do we put so much energy and commitment? And what are they enabling us to do, songs, do you think?
Explore our emotions, and bring memories back, and thoughts for the future. It's like for me, I can only say, for me, that help you explore your own inner landscape and what actually you share with other people. Sometimes it's quite a shock when somebody says a lyric. You think, oh, that is like singing my life.
That's my life. Yeah.
So that is a very it's a great spiritual feeling for somebody to know that that. And I don't think any other art form does it in quite the same way, because music actually hits parts of the brain that other art forms can't hit. And it always, because you're absorbing it through your ears, your other senses become enmeshed in it. So you have pictures, images of what happened in a time, smells, rain, anything.
Yeah.
It kind of conjures up the whole lot. So it's not just the sound. And it's also like somewhere a place you can play in. You know, when you hear music, I love it sitting in a plane. This sounds really crazy, but I love sitting in a plane and listening to the harmonics of the engine.
Yes.
And the symphonies that come up. I could
Yeah.
have been Tchaikovsky if only I could.
As a small child, I used to do this with bath water. We had a very tinny bath, and the water came, and you could hear tunes in it.
It's great, isn't it, to actually
Yeah.
hear the harmonics and
Yes,
everything, and
yes.
realise that there are harmonics happening everywhere. So sound is just an amazing thing, because it's sound and vibration. It's happening like all the atoms that are moving in this table. It's really profound. So I think that's why I like music. I also like the visual arts, but there you go.
I don't think we're going to beat that. Let's close. Thank you very much for being completely recognisable as yourself for half a century. We're going to go back to the early days for another of your number ones, one with a message that's more needful now, I suppose, than it ever was. Long live love. Sandie Shaw, this has been a revelation in many ways. Thank you very much for stopping by.
And a revolution.
Venus must have heard my plea. She has sent someone along for me. I have waited a long, long time for somebody to call mine, and at last he's come along. Baby, oh, nothing can go wrong. We meet every night at 8, and I don't get home till 8. I say to myself each day, baby, oh, long, long live love. True love must be the greatest thing. I know now I sing of the moon and stars above. How I love to be in love. We meet every night at 8, and I don't get home till 8. I say to myself each day, baby, oh, long, long live love. Now of one thing I'm more than sure. Since love come, I don't want more than to kiss him every night. Makes every everything alright. We meet every night at 8, and I don't get home till 8. I say to myself each day, baby, oh long, long live love. We meet every night at 8, and I don't get home till 8. I say to myself each day, baby, oh long, long live love. Long, long live love.
Long live love, amen to that. And long live music as well. I don't see any reason why Sandie Shaw should retire from it, or any really convincing sign that she will. As for that Dagenham Hall of Fame, that should surely happen too. Sandie and the ex-Archbishop of Canterbury, George Carey, would be admirable patrons for a start. I think there are things to be learned from her as well about the decade of the 60s and its people, namely that if you were prepared to stand up for your own self, amid all the idolatry and cultist beliefs and self-destructive behaviours and experimental weirdness of those times, then in the end you could come through stronger than before. My thanks to Sandie and to my producer, Steve Softly. This was a Wise Buddha production for BBC Radio 2, online, on digital radio, and on 88 to 91 FM.